I found her one day in a coffee shop in 2006 or 7, and she said, "Where have you been?" And I said, I feel like I've been under a rock. And so I would look back at my 23-year-old self and say, you do not have to bury yourself in your corporate life or your work life. You definitely need to go ahead and start looking for people and finding people that help you in any way, in some type of a community position.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Mindy Corporon. Mindy is the Vice President of Strategy and Engagement with Global Care Force. She is also the co-founder of Workplace Healing, where she empowers corporate leaders to transform how they support employees navigating life and loss transitions. Mindy's vision for Workplace Healing was born from personal tragedy, which you're going to hear about in this interview, and a challenging re-entry into corporate life. She is the author of Healing a Shattered Soul, where she shares her family's story of resilience, faith, and unwavering commitment to courageous kindness. In response to her tragedy, she and her family founded 7Days Inc., a foundation dedicated to overcoming hate by promoting kindness and understanding through education and dialogue. You can learn more about Mindy at mindycorporon.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Mindy.
Mindy, welcome to the Corporate Couch this afternoon.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm standing, but I'll pretend like I'm sitting on the couch.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I might sit in a little bit, but I like to stand often during the day. So I'm standing in the couch.
Love that. My standing desk is coming Saturday, and I can't wait. The more I read, the more, sitting is the new smoking, and it's shitty for your mobility. And
yes, I agree. I don't know how your hips are, but my hips get achy after about 45 minutes or an hour now. And so my body says, stand up. And so I stand up. So I'm standing up, and I love my remote desk. It's one of those flexi spot desks, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah. You might have to send me the link. I might have to change. So not that I even tried mine yet, but it's just going to sit on top of my regular desk. And yeah.
Yeah, whatever you can get to get your hiney out of the chair will help.
There you go. You might be the first guest that has said hiney on the podcast. So there you go.
I was trying to be nice.
You can swear. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I do. So now that I know, I have permission.
Oh, good. Yeah, full license. I like that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, excited to talk to you. Very honored you came on. I mean, you have a great career, and something, a personal tragedy, changed you and your family's life forever. And we'll talk about that. But let's start with a fun question. I haven't asked this one in a while, but, out of people living or dead, what person would you love to have a cocktail with or have a dinner party with?
Yes, a cocktail or a dinner party. There are lots of people that I can think of to do that with. And what I have to talk about based on that question is that I had the opportunity to meet Sir Richard Branson this summer. And looking back, I have probably wanted to meet him since I was in my early 20s. I went to Kansas City and started my career when I was about 23. And oh my gosh, thinking of that. So my son is 22. So thinking about when I
Oh,
started my
wow.
career, is it 22 or 23? And I just have seen everything that Richard Branson has done. Well, I've not seen everything he's done. So thank goodness not all of
Yeah.
us have seen that. But he's just been an incredible leader, an inspiring person to me. And I love how cheeky he is. And I, I just can't get enough of like reading about what he does and what he's accomplished and how he treats his employees. Just all of that has been extremely fascinating to me, the whole process of my life. But I never thought about trying to work at one of his companies or anything like that. But I've always thought he was fascinating. And this summer, actually in the month of May, I heard that he was going to personally be on a cruise ship out of Miami. And I just said to the woman when she said that, I said, I'm supposed to be on that ship. I said, I'm supposed to meet him. And she was like, you are really definite about that. And I said, yes, I am. I said, he's actually on my vision board. So
Wow.
again, Jeff, I'd been thinking about him and reading all the articles about him along my career and his. And in 2013, my two boys and I and a friend of our older son, Reet, we put vision boards together, and I was practicing at home for an activity, a development activity we were going to do at the office the next week. And I wanted to practice it before I put it on for the team at Mindy Corporon Wealth Management. And so we were putting these vision boards together, and my vision board had Richard Branson on it. And many people looked at it and they're like, why? And I said, I've just always thought he was fascinating. I don't know. I think it'd be really unique to meet him. And so when I heard he was going to be on this cruise ship out of Miami, and I live 1 hour north of Miami, I said, I will be on that cruise ship and I will meet Sir Richard Branson. And so I kept thinking about how to make that happen. And I did through a variety of circumstances. And I had 2 minutes and 40 seconds with him. And it was fantastic and amazing. And I just relish how he listened to me. And that was the two of us engaged. And then prior to that, maybe the day before, I asked him a question in one of our sessions. There were leadership sessions going on the ship, and there were Virgin leaders on the ship. And he came into one of the sessions, and I got an opportunity to ask him a question about anti-Semitism and some work that he's focused on in Israel. And it was a very emotional opportunity to hear from him. And that was just as meaningful as the 2 minutes that I had with him the next day. So that is who I would say. I would love to have wine with him too. And I would love to have dinner with him, but I'm very thankful that I had my
Wow.
2 minutes and 40 seconds with him.
So it was a sponsored cruise event, so you knew. When you first started telling the story, I thought, how did you find out like Richard Branson's going to be on this cruise ship? But yeah, I get it now. Okay.
Yep,
Uh,
his cruise line. It was his
yeah,
cruise line, and it's a celebratory
yeah,
event that they do. And I had just met this travel agent about a month ahead of time,
yeah,
and she said, "Oh, by the way, Richard Branson's going to be on this cruise." And I said, she had no idea, and I said, "I will be on that cruise, and I will meet him,"
yeah.
and I did.
And just to clarify for the audience, when you say other Virgin speakers, that means they worked for the company, not that they
Correct.
were first time
Not not that
speakers.
they're maybe not first time speakers, and maybe not first time cruisers or crew members or
Yeah.
sailors. They call everyone on the ship sailors.
Oh, nice.
They work for Virgin Voyages. The name of
Okay.
that is called Virgin Voyages. His brand is all Virgin, and the
Yeah.
cruise ships are Virgin Voyages.
Yeah, I love that. The two things that came out of what you said also, I've never asked this question. Since your son's 22 and you talked about coming to Kansas City at 23, what would Mindy tell her 23-year-old self?
I would tell my 23-year-old self to not bury myself under a rock, because that's what I did at 23. I got some good employment, which was great. And I was in the wealth management industry, and I literally buried myself in work. And I did not go meet people or network or have engagement in Kansas City for several years. And and then when I did, and I'm telling you, it was probably from like 1994 to 2007, I did not network and be out in community. I, had a family and I was raising my kids, and I was very involved in my own space, and I was involved in church, but I didn't go out and meet the women and the men that I did after that. In 2007, a door was opened for me, and a very good friend of mine, Karen ZC, she is a powerful networker. And I knew Karen ZC because she happened to be a Tri Delta in college. That's her sorority, and I was a Tri Delta in college. We were not in the same college nor at the same time, but we met in Kansas City because of our sorority. And I found her one day in a coffee shop in 2006 or 7, and she said, "Where have you been?" And I said, I feel like I've been under a rock. And so I would look back at my 23-year-old self and say, you do not have to bury yourself in your corporate life or your work life. You definitely need to go ahead and start looking for people and finding people that help you in any way, in some type of a community position.
Yeah, I love that. I can relate to some of that. I did work for big companies, so I had a bigger network, but they were all internal. But I agree with that advice. I would have done the same thing. The second part of, that came up, you talked about a vision board, which again, you may be the first guest to bring up a vision board, but I've done vision boards before. What prompted you, how long you've been doing it, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you, an expert on vision boards is Dr. Nicole Price, and she's local to Kansas City, and I will make sure that you meet her because you would want to have her on. She puts on a vision board class via, I think, Facebook every year, and I have yet to do it, but let me talk about my vision boards, but I wanted to remember to speak to you about Dr. Nicole Price. The vision board idea came from just professional development and learning about one another in the office. So that is why I wanted to create the vision board in 2013. Perhaps I'd heard it in some kind of session or leadership session that I might have attended. I can't remember where I heard it, but I've put vision boards together just a few times. The vision board I put together in 2013 is the most important one to me because I put it together with my boys, and they each created their own vision boards. And what it meant to me, what we did, the practice of putting a vision board together is giving yourself time just to relax, play music that you really like, that is your favorite kind of music that makes you, feel good and comfortable, whatever that might be. And we had a whole stack of magazines from, home and garden to, cowboy couture, just everything in between, wrestling, cars, pets, everything that we could think of, and this huge stack of magazines. And you just take time and relax, and you have this blank slate in front of you, and you can come to the table with specific questions. Where do I see myself in 3 years? Or what do I want to accomplish in 2025? It can be as specific or as broad as you want. And in 2013, mine was just very broad. I just said, hey, just look at stuff and what resonates with you. And we each created those vision boards. So it can be very specific and niche oriented based on a question, and or it can be broad. And so I've only really created a few. I feel very close to that vision board in 2013. And so what's interesting about that, Jeff, is that I can look at some of the pictures that are on there, and one of them is Richard Branson, but others are dancing. So it shows a woman and a man dancing, and my husband and I are now in dance classes. And then another picture is of Florida, and I now live in Florida. So it's just really interesting about things that might be on your heart or in your soul that you're not thinking about top of mind. And that space gives you an opportunity to let it come out. And then you look at it, and some of those things have manifested in a very positive way.
Yeah, no, I love that. Love that. Thank you for sharing. So I know you grew up in Oklahoma, but tell us a little bit about your childhood. Like, what did you love doing? What did you have aspirations as a child? When I'm an adult, I'm going to do this. So talk about a little bit about your childhood.
Yes, I grew up in Marlow, Oklahoma. We moved there when I was 7. And so before that, we had lived in Oklahoma City. We had lived in Perry, Oklahoma. And I was born in Ponca City, Oklahoma, for anyone who knows all about Oklahoma. So from Ponca City to Oklahoma City to Perry, Oklahoma, and then Marlow, Oklahoma. And I graduated from Marlowe High School, so second grade till I graduated high school. And I wanted to be an astronaut. I expected that I was going to be working for NASA and be an astronaut. And in 1986, my senior year in high school, I remember standing in my mom's bedroom watching the shuttle go up and exploding.
Oh,
And I just thought, okay, I knew that could happen, but when it happened, I was a little deterred, but I still went to college with the idea, and I enrolled as an engineering major. I enrolled as an aeronautical engineering major. So I expected to continue on that process and see what I could do to help NASA. So that was what I wanted to do by the time I became, 14, 15, 16. And before that, I can hear all my high school classmates and elementary school classmates saying, I used to lead people on the playground. It's probably no surprise. I would organize the games that we played, and I would say, oh, we're going to play Red Rover, and I would organize them. And I was small then and smaller, I'm not that big now, and I was small, and I would stand up. There was a water well on our playground, and I would stand up on the water well and I would give directions to people on where they needed to go and what they needed to do. And I had great friends. I still do. I'm connected with several people still from second grade through senior in high school. So I loved Marlowe very much. It's warm in my heart.
Love that. Well, you answered one of my next questions. So you go to the University of Oklahoma, and I always ask people, I saw you graduate with a communication degree, but
yes,
most people change their major. So you're already you're an aeronautical engineer. So why'd you pivot to communication specifically?
I am smart enough to be an engineer, and I tell myself that often. I have two very, very good friends who are both engineers. They're both civil engineers in Oklahoma, and they tease me about my engineering brain. And Don will say, "You should have finished that engineering degree." So I realized in engineering, my second semester of my freshman year, I was failing, and now I was failing in my version. I was failing. I was making a D in a class and then a whole string of C's. And I had made over a 4 point in high school. So I was not used to making, below an A plus. So it was definitely a struggle going to college and working on an engineering major, at just being thrust into it. There was no anything in between, and not a lot of guidance. I was lucky enough and grateful that I was part of the president's leadership class my freshman year, and that helped to give me community of other students, and I leaned on them and asked them questions. And specifically, I went to one of my engineering professors the second semester and said, what do I need to do to continue with this, program and process? And he said, well, what else are you doing on campus? And I answered with, well, I'm a Tri Delta, I'm in a sorority, I'm in president's leadership class, and I'm going to be trying out for OU cheerleader. And he sat back in his chair and it creaked and he rocked a little bit. And he said, little Missy, you're going to be here about 5 years, maybe 6. I was like, excuse me? And he said, at the rate you're going and how you're performing, you're going to be here, longer. And Jeff, I don't think that I called my parents and asked them, is that okay if I'm here longer? I think I just knew they were paying for school. It wasn't my expectation to be there longer. You're supposed to do this in 4 years. And so one of my favorite classes had been a communications class. I had just loved this communications class, and that happened my sophomore year. And you know what, Jeff, I need to tell you one more thing. I was failing enough that I didn't get initiated into my sorority with all of my pledge sisters. I was a holdover pledge. It was devastating. I had forgotten that until we started talking about it. Not forgotten, but
well, that's why they call it the corporate couch, Mindy.
It was definitely very pivotal in my life. So I got like a 2.24 my first semester, and I did not get initiated. So again, very devastating. Went to see the professor my second semester, and I dropped engineering, and I think I just went no major for a little while. And then the second semester, my sophomore year, I was in a communications class, interpersonal communication, and I loved it and I excelled at it. I was just this like perfect. I'm like, I didn't even know that classes like this existed. And it was awesome. And so I just switched my major to communication. And when I messaged my parents, well, I didn't message my parents. I called my parents live on the phone and said, I'm switching to communication. My dad, I said, what are you going to do with that? I said, well, I really don't know, but maybe I'll go to law school. And he said, oh God, he's a physician. He said, a lawyer. Okay. I think they always expected that I might be the next physician in the family. And so he teased me for a couple of years about getting a communication degree and potentially being a lawyer. So that's how I ended up with a communications degree.
Yeah, I love that. So, yeah, now I'm really intrigued because, you communication major, and I don't know what your first job out of college was. We'll talk about that. I'll ask you about that in a second. But I know you had a long career being in, financial wealth management, co-founding your own company and all that. But so tell us about your first job out of college. How'd you get it? And, maybe if it doesn't relate, talk about your pivot to doing wealth management with, I believe it was Payne Weber back in 1994.
My first job out of college is a job that I created myself. I was an entrepreneur, and I noticed as a cheerleader at the University of Oklahoma, after having been a cheerleader in a rural community in Oklahoma, I noticed that there was a difficult situation every summer for students who did not have access to all the camp materials. So not Boy Scout camping, but going to cheer camp. The students in my area where I was in Oklahoma, we didn't have access to what someone in Oklahoma City or someone in Dallas would have access to. So I'm talking about, the right ribbons for your hair, or the matching socks, or the matching shirts and shorts. And so, this is way back in the day, and so when I came out of college, it was my senior year actually, and I created a company called Cheer Stuff. And I drove around Oklahoma to rural schools. I had a binder full of designs, and I would ask them what designs they wanted. And I had contracts with some sporting goods locations out of Atlanta. And I created a company called Cheer Stuff. And I worked on that company for about 18 months and wore myself out, wore myself thin, learned a lot of lessons, had some very difficult conversations with adults because I was not yet adulting enough. It was good. Somebody stole my ideas one time too. So I went to a school, and I'm sure if I thought about it, I could remember the name of the high school, but I won't mention it even if I can remember it. But I went and I met with the coach or assistant coach and some cheerleaders, and I did my follow-up call, and they said, no, we're fine. We're not going to buy from you. I said, okay. And then I went to the camp later where they were attending, and Jeff, they were wearing my designs on their shirt.
Yeah. Wow.
I was floored.
Yeah.
I was floored. I thought, what? So that was my first foray into fraud and stealing.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I learned a lot doing that. So I opened my own company. That was my own company. And then my next job was being a Kansas City Chiefs cheerleader. That was it. That was what I went. I went from Cheer Stuff to driving to Kansas City and becoming a Kansas City Chiefs cheerleader.
Now,
and
now I'm not. I've never been a Kansas City Chief or NFL or even a college cheerleader. But what I know about it, I think, is they don't really pay the NFL cheerleaders that much money. It's more of a prestige thing. So, what else were you doing?
I was waiting tables.
Okay.
I was waiting tables. Yes. So
Wow.
I was waiting tables, and I worked at Johnny's Tavern on 119th. It's near the Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah, Cheesecake and the old Sprint, now T-Mobile campus. Yeah.
Yes, and it's near Best Regards Bakery. I should mention Best Regards because I love them. So
there'll be an affiliate link so Mindy could earn some money if you.
Yeah, great. Yes. So I love them, Robert and his wife. So I was a Chiefs cheerleader, and I did move without a job. I had cash from my cheer stuff, and I moved to. I drove to Kansas City. I hadn't moved yet. I drove to Kansas City. I tried out. I made it. And then my mom and I drove to Kansas City, and I moved into an apartment, and I got a job at the cheerleading company called ICF, International Cheerleading Foundation. At about the same time, I got my position with Chiefs Cheerleaders. And you're correct. At the time, we were able to receive 2 tickets to every game, and we could sell them if we wanted to. So we had 2 tickets to every game, and we got paid $25 per hour for promotions. And promotions would last anywhere from like a Saturday from 8 a.m. to almost midnight. I mean, we were busy all weekend long, all the time. And then we would have, Sunday or Monday games.
Oh, well, yeah, that's okay. That's more than I thought.
Yes.
So I want to go back to cheer stuff. I mean, that's pretty. Being a young entrepreneur is kind of more in vogue. The last, I'll say, 10 years. But like, where did you get that entrepreneurial bug to just come out of OU and start your own company?
I guess my dad was sort of an entrepreneur. He was a physician, a family practice physician. And when we moved to Marlow, he moved into a space where he was supposed to be replacing 1 or 2 elderly physicians. And my dad was the young buck coming in, and I don't remember all the details, but it didn't work out well. And so my dad moved himself with his business, not us physically. We stayed in Marlow, but he moved his practice to Duncan, Oklahoma, and he rented space, and he got an office manager, and he hired nurses, and he opened his own practice. So later on, my mom became the office manager, and that's how I grew up. So I grew up with my parents running the medical practice. And so that in itself was just something I was used to. I wasn't around people like you had a big corporate job. I wasn't around anybody like that. I didn't know that. I was in a small town, and most of the people worked locally in the small town, at the bank or at Sonic or at Hoppensack or Halliburton. They worked at Halliburton, or they drove to Fort Sill. These were people that I knew. And my dad was a physician and had his own practice. And so I learned from my mom and dad about how you do things on your own, and that you can, sometimes you're going to fail, and sometimes it's going to hurt. And you learn from that. You have challenges, and you keep moving forward, but definitely learn from the mistakes that we make, or things that hurt us, even if it wasn't our fault, that something might hurt us, and we want to process that and keep moving forward and learn from it.
Yeah, I love that. So now I'm real curious. So you're doing this cheerleading stuff, and chief cheerleader, and ICF, and all this good thing. So talk about the pivot into, going to a financial management firm and starting that part of your career.
So when a door closes, a window opens. And I knew that. I think as a young person, that's something that I tell young people, and even, not young people, all the time. And I have to tell myself that. I have to remind myself of that. So sometimes things close in front of us and are shut off because there's something better. And just we learn to be patient, and something will be better. And I'm not patient, so I'm not patient at all. I just kind of keep going. Anyway, so while I was a Chiefs cheerleader and I was working at ICF, my ICF position was only guaranteed to me for the summer. And as the summer was coming to an end, I was looking for employment, and I was interviewing in all kinds of places. I interviewed with the developer of the Northland Mall, and at the same time, I was working at Johnny's Tavern. And I'm at Johnny's Tavern, and I'm there during lunch, and 2 men show up, and I'm their server, and they thought I was a good server, and they said, "Can we have free drinks?" And I said, "No, you cannot, because free drinks to you means I pay for them, because they aren't really free, and I don't have the money to buy your free drinks." And I said, "It looks to me like you all can buy your own drinks." And he said, "Oh, okay. What else do you do besides work here and talk to your customers like this?" And I said, "I'm looking for employment." And he said, "Well, in what area?" And I said, I can do all kinds of stuff. So I'm really not sure. I can do administrative work. I'm looking for a career. I don't know yet. He said, "Where have you been interviewing?" And I'd been interviewing at hotels for like event planning. I thought the event planning would be good. And then I said, "And I just interviewed with the Northland Mall, and I'm thinking that I'm going to get offered that position." And he said, "Well, we have a job available, and would you like to interview?" And so I asked him what it was. It was a financial firm called Berthel Fisher and Company, and they were out of Des Moines, Iowa. And I interviewed with them within a few days, and I got 2 job offers on the exact same day. I got a job offer from the Northland Mall to run all of their events and their community activities. And I got a job offer at Berthel Fisher and Company to be in the back office working in wealth management. And I really deliberated on what to do. And based on my career, you can tell which one I did.
Wow. And what was the kind of, did you get, a God whisper, or what was the, was it listening to your gut, or just flip the coin? How'd you make the decision?
I think I made the decision based on my gut instinct. I feel like I love a challenge and I'm not afraid of a challenge. And I felt like while I had interviewed for and thought I really wanted that position at the mall, and it would have been good and I would have been good at it, I would have done a great job at it. And I probably would have gone into economic development because I think that's fascinating. So I do see, and I was seeing a path there, and I thought it was very interesting. But I also have an engineering brain, and I was also very good in math in school, taking calculus and physics. And so I thought, well, I don't know anything about wealth management. And my granddad was an investor, and he liked to talk to me about investing. And I didn't know much. I didn't really know much about it at all. And I thought, I'm going to go the new path. So I called Berthel Fisher back and said, I'll accept your offer, made sure they said yes. And then I called them all and said, thank you, I'm not going to take the offer. And it all happened on the same day. And I had been, sweating bullets trying to figure out what I was I going to have a position. And then ICF called me about 2 days later and said, hey, we do have an opening. Do you want to take a position? And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
oh, I just took a job at this
Yeah.
firm. And, so what that did to me too, is it took me out of my community of those cheer people that I knew. I was still a Chiefs cheerleader, but it really removed me from the people who had helped me get there and get settled.
Right.
So that was daunting,
Right.
definitely daunting, but I did it. And I went into this whole space of working in a man's world. There were 2 women in the office and I was one of them, and young, and everybody else in the office were men and, a little gruff, a little rough around the edges. And I walked in and I wasn't going to take their crap. They figured that out really quickly. But it was good. I mean, I didn't ever have any significant problems like that I would need to sue for, anything like that. Like nothing like that ever presented itself. And I'm very thankful, because I know when women work in typically a man's field, that can definitely happen. Well, it can happen in any field, but I was a young woman working in a man's field, and I just really held my own and learned how to do that when I was at Berthel Fisher, and then beyond. And then I went to Kidder Peabody, and then I went to Payne Weber.
All right. Interesting. Yeah. So we don't have to. I mean, you were at Payne Weber. Looked like for 9 years. They became UBS. H&R
Yes.
Block had a financial advisory division back in the day, which became Ameriprise. Looked like you were there about 4.5 years. Maybe walk through some career highlights there. I mean, just briefly, and then you pivot to start your own company with your partner and start your own wealth management firm. So just take us briefly through that journey.
So at Berthel Fisher, I hit the glass ceiling. I'm just have to start there. So I hit the glass ceiling very quickly. I appreciated what they were teaching me and how things were going really initially. And they encouraged me to get licensed in everything that I need to be licensed in at the time. So that was insurance, Series 7, I believe 65 at the time. I don't remember. I got all the licenses I needed to get, and I was thrilled. And then there was difficulty getting further education after that, because my position was at the administrator's desk, in administration. And so a door closed and then another door opened, and that door led me to Kidder Peabody. And at Kidder Peabody, I was an assistant for a short period of time. And I said to the gentleman that I was working with, I can do what you're doing, and I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go try to do it on my own. And I said, but I won't leave you quickly until I know that I have that other position. And one of those gentlemen fired me that day, got up and walked to the branch manager's office and said, stop paying her commission. And then the other gentleman asked me to be his business partner. And he said, I see your work ethic. You're here on the weekends. This is what you want to do. He said, I would love to figure out how we could be in some kind of a partnership. and that was Richard Boyer. And that was definitely a highlight of my life and my career, was for him to ask me to do that. And then we did that. So we started partnering then. And I'm going to tell you, Jeff, when we left Kidder Peabody, and he selected Payne Weber because he had clout, he had assets under management, and I didn't have any of that. Everyone still looked at me as an assistant. And when we moved together, I mean, people thought we were having an affair. People thought, she's got to be sleeping with him. I mean,
No.
there was all kinds of scuttlebutt. Oh my goodness. So luckily none of it was to my face, but I heard about all of it. We moved from Kidder to Payne Weber, and this branch manager at the time was John Elsperman, and he was very good for me as well. So he was very still old school and expected a lot more cold calling and things. And where I said, well, Richard Boyer has this book of business, and I feel like it's about relationships. And so I nurtured the relationships that we have, and we created, and it was so fun being in that space. And the fact that Richard Boyer was open to that, and I energized him, and he ended up getting his CFA. He became a chartered financial analyst while we were partners, and that took us to another level. It was a really great partnership for many years.
Yeah.
And as you said, so we transitioned to an RIA in 2007. We realized that we had the capacity and the skills. He had the financial skills, and I had the organizational and leadership skills to create our own entity. And so we created Boyer Corporon Wealth Management in 2007 and went independent.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts. He creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
Okay, so you're in this corporate umbrella for a long time now. Kidder Peabody, Payne Weber, H&R Block, Financial Advisors. Now it's Boyer and Corporon Wealth Management. What's kind of the big surprises? Like, oh yeah, this is our own firm now. What? I didn't know we have to do this.
This is when I came outside of the rock. This is when I peeked out of the rock. And
Oh
said,
yeah, that's what you said. Up until
yes.
07. Here we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So in 07, I came out from under the rock and started going to events, and I found Women's Employment Network, and I went to absolutely everything they offered. Everything they offered. I went to Women's Employment Network. I learned from leading women, powerful women in Kansas City who really led the way in corporate America. Oh my gosh, it was fantastic. So I went to all of that, made sure that we had a membership to Women's Employment Network for all the women that we ended up hiring. Another huge highlight was, Richard and I did the hiring together, and he was very good at, and both of us were very good at really paying attention to equality in the office for genders. And I believe now, even if you look at BCWM is what they go by, their website, it's still very balanced between male and female gender. And that was really key for me, that whatever spot we were hiring in, make sure that we kept the pool open for male and female employees. So that was a highlight. And I love empowering people to find what they want to find the path that is important to them. That's very enriching to me. It was so important to have the membership to Women's Employment Network. It was important to me that we gave back to the community. It was important to me that we had a Halloween party and we all dressed up every year. It was important that we had a holiday party and that it was a nice holiday party. All of those things were so near and dear to me and leading the company that I loved it. I had expected that my career would end there, that I would stay there for years and years. And then that came to just a sudden halt when the tragedy happened in 2014.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next question. So talk about April 13th, 2014, the day that changed your life, and your family's life forever.
Yeah, so on April 13th, my dad and son were both murdered at the Jewish Community Center in Overland Park, and Terry Lamanna was murdered at Village Shalom. And the murderer was a known white supremacist. He'd been in jail for it, imprisoned for it. He'd been on watch lists before and was not supposed to have access to firearms, and yet he did. And he wanted to murder Jews that day, and my dad and older son Reet were on the campus. They had pulled into the campus at the J for Reet to sing an audition for Casey Superstar. And Jeff, I was supposed to drive him. I wanted to drive him. I said the night before, I'm going to drive you to the competition. And Reet said, no, Mom, I think you need to go to Lucas's lacrosse game. And so I went to Lucas's lacrosse game, and my dad drove Reet. And, the location where he'd parked, the shooter pulled in right behind them and murdered them just as my dad got out of the truck. And then he turned the gun on Reet and murdered Reet. So the last thing that my son saw was his grandfather being shot. Yeah. And then he lost his life about a half hour later.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just I don't think any parent or son or daughter can even imagine that happening. So just kind of talk about, I mean, you're obviously decimated. Just kind of talk about, your process and, what you did after that. And I know you've now made it into positives with 7 Days and Workplace Healing and other things you're doing, but kind of talk about the immediate aftermath, maybe the first year and what you were going through.
Yes, what I would share is that in the first 8 weeks, it was difficult to eat. It was difficult to get dressed. It was difficult to shower and eat and do just normal things. And so I had long hair at the time that the murders happened. And I mentioned this, I digressed to my hair because I had long hair at the time, and very quickly I cut my hair super short because I did not have the energy to wash my hair and dry my hair and get dressed and go do something. Like, that was just too much. I could only do so many things. And I was so foggy. I was so foggy brained that I couldn't do math. So I had been in calculus and physics and algebra too, and I loved math. And I had helped create many of the platforms that we were using at Boyer Corporate Wealth Management. And I wasn't the brains behind them, but I knew how to use them. I knew what they were, and aesthetically, I knew how to put them all together and use them and have client conversations. And when I went back into the office, and I started going back into the office at about 4 to 5 weeks, but I could only be there for about 2 hours at a time. It was so painful to read through the emails. I tried to read through every single email that people had sent me in condolences. I could spend about 2 hours at a time. So it was definitely a process. And then I would just leave crying. And everyone in the office knew my dad, and everyone in the office knew Reed, and everyone was just devastated. So it wasn't just affecting me, it was affecting all of us. I mean, they knew that I'd lost those people, my people, and then they lost those people, and then they also lost me for a period of time.
Right.
And so when I did start coming back into the office and I had a client appointment, I couldn't get through our client worksheet. I looked at it and I didn't know how to use it. I knew I was supposed to know. I remembered that I was supposed to know. And I got up and I went to ask Cindy Wysong, who is still there, and she's one of my hires. And I said, Cindy, I need your help. And she's like, sure, what? And I said, I can't, I don't even know how to do this. And she just looked at me like, what do you mean? And I said, well, just come finish the meeting. And so she did. She got up, and we always cross-trained. She knew exactly where I was and what was happening, and she stepped right in. It's amazing. And she finished the meeting. And I don't remember who it was with, but I left that meeting and I realized that not only had I lost my humans, my dad and my son, I had lost so much more. Like my soul was just dark and my brain was different. Like everything was different. I realized how completely different I was because of the trauma. And a year out, I didn't want to go to anything social. I was so fearful, Jeff, of someone wanting to talk about their children. Just the word children would cause deep pain and tears. And so I wouldn't go to anything school related for, I don't mean not at school, but like parents having something at their house and where they always want to say, oh, how's Reed or how's Lucas or, Samantha's doing great or Sydney's doing great or this happened. It didn't matter whether they were doing great or they just not doing great. I was so fearful of that. And so work related items, I didn't want to speak to anybody outside of my bubble. And so I just really pulled in, but very thankfully, by that time, I had been in Women Who Mean Business. So I had been nominated and accepted to be in Women Who Mean Business. And I had been nominated and accepted to be in Hellsberg Entrepreneurial Mentoring Program. And then I just had a great group of Tri Delta friends. And I had an amazing group of Kansas City Chief Cheerleader alumni. And all of those people, plus people from church and parents from school, they came to us because I could not go to them. I just kind of hibernated. And in the book that I wrote, Healing a Shattered Soul, I tell stories about my husband making me leave the house in July. Oh my gosh, it was so awful because I knew when we left, that was one thing, but I knew when we came back, it's just a reminder that Reed's not there. And so I didn't want to leave because I didn't want to come back and feel that. And so, oh my gosh, it was all of that. And then another morning, my 12-year-old Lucas said, I said, I'm leaving for work. And he said, don't get shot. Oh. I'm like, how do you help your 12-year-old, when they say that? So it was horrible. It was horrible. And about 12 months in, I knew that I couldn't stay at Boyer Corporon. About 12 months in, I knew that I just did not have the same passion for what we were doing. I knew that there was somewhere else I was supposed to be needed. And so I started really thinking about that and talking to Richard Boyer, my business partner still, about that. And it took several years because our company wasn't ready for me just to be completely gone. I hadn't died, so they didn't have insurance to pay for somebody new and amazing to come and just immediately replace me. But we had some great, amazing employees who were almost ready to replace me. And within about 2 years, they were ready to replace me. And so that's what happened. And I left in 2018.
Yeah, you mentioned your book, Healing a Shattered Soul. When did you start writing it? And was it part of your grieving process to help you get through your life, really?
Yes, I would say I actually started Healing a Shattered Soul without realizing it. Within a week of their murders, I started journaling, and I probably have 12 completely filled front and back pages of journals that I've written. So thick journals, small journals, big, small, etc. Whatever kind of journal I need at the time, I get it. So this is my journal now. I know your audience isn't seeing this, but it says "Be awesome today."
Nice.
And it's little, and I'm working through it. And I don't write in it every single day, but I used to. So I started writing immediately after their murders. But the book itself, when I said, I'm going to really get this on paper and write something so that I can help people heal from what I've experienced. And I started that in 2016, and it was not good. It was just all about the day, and it was, very painful, and it was about 3 chapters, and it wasn't good at all. And I sent it to a publisher, and thank goodness she said to me, look, I'm very sorry about what happened. It's horrible. And you have a story to tell, but this isn't the way to tell it. And she said, and I don't know the right way. She said, you're going to have to figure that out. And so I set it down. And that was like probably into 2016, early 17. And I did not pick it up again until COVID hit all of us. And when COVID hit and the world shut down, I thought, oh, I wasn't working at Boyer Corporon. We had started Workplace Healing, but it wasn't, on fire 100% every day. And I thought, I'm going to finish that book. So that first summer of COVID, so in 2020, I blocked my entire calendar in June. It was either June or July. I blocked a whole month and just said, I'm not meeting with anybody. I'm not working on workplace healing very much. I'm just focusing on writing the book. So I got enough written that I got it to another publisher, and they picked it up, Front Edge Publishing. So a huge highlight for me was Front Edge Publishing, and their team is amazing, and they're still amazing. They're still connected with me and help promote when I speak and the book, and I really value them a lot. And I handed them the full transcript in December, and then between them and me and editing and getting it all ready, it was ready to be published. It was ready for preprint in April, and then it was published on May 3rd of 2021.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk about you mentioned workplace healing. So you kind of go from a CEO of a wealth management firm to a B2B software service, platform to help companies with employees that have gone through a tragic event that need help with their grieving and assimilation back into into the company.
The process was difficult. It was fun and exciting, and difficult when you leave an office space where you have someone helping you all the time in a different way, or you have a team of people. And I remember, I mean, we did the build out of the office for Mindy Corporon, right? So we picked the paint and the carpet and the furniture and the copy machine, so I had already done all of that. And now I've got workplace healing, and we're working from home, and I had to set up my little office again. I had to go get my printer, and I had to set up my printer. And I just always think of that as like, oh my gosh, I have to set up my office again. It was hard. It was very hard and fun and exciting. Lisa Cooper and I joined forces on workplace healing, and she was very good at really trying to slow me down, and I was good at speeding her up. So I would say, oh, we need to do this, this, and this. I also was very grateful for all the connections that I had. We needed an attorney. I know 5. We needed an accountant. I already have one. We need some help with software. I know a company. So I just had this vast network that made it very easy to lift the company up. So that we did. So I focused on operations and getting it, functional as a company. And then we started consulting. So we started consulting, and we created a workshop, and we got clients, and I'm actually still doing that now. So it's like now I call workplace healing a side hustle, because we built a software, Jeff. We raised money, we spent money, we had employees, we had to let employees go. And what we realized is we built something that people like and think is unique, but it's such a small niche product that it needs to fit into a bigger home. And so I'm actually still looking for that home. So right now, Lisa we worked on this for 6.5 years, and Lisa has pivoted, and she's going in another direction right now. And I'm the majority shareholder of Workplace Healing, and I have board members. So I'm a board member, and Jay Dodds and Heidi Lehman, they were my other board members. And we're continually working on cultivating where else can this go? Because I think that Lisa and I were early. While people talk about, and we're talking about mental health, COVID really helped start that conversation. But what I didn't know at the time, Jeff, was that, and Lisa and I didn't understand this, is that in HR and HR departments everywhere, because COVID happened, they were grabbing everything they could, this software, that software, anything to help their employees. Well, we didn't have a software yet. And by the time we came around 12 months later, they were already divesting of the stuff that they didn't need. So we came in when they were divesting, not when they were interested in bringing on. So we hit some pretty significant roadblocks, but I feel confident that what we built is important and valuable, and it's going to find the right home. And I don't know where that is right now. I have some irons in the fire and conversations going on that I can't talk about because of contracts and legality, but I do think that we were early, and I'm definitely hopeful that in the future I'll be able to talk more about it.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, and then talk about 7 days. You started that even earlier than workplace healing.
Yeah, well, 7 days started in July of 2014. So my dad and Reed were murdered in April, and in July of 2014, I heard from her bookbinder, who I had met previously at Kidder Peabody. So he is a Jewish man and great in fundraising and great in investing. And he called me in July. Mindy, this is Herb. He said, I'm so sorry. I know we've talked. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Everyone's always going to be sorry about what happened. That's what he said. Everyone's going to be sorry about what happened all the time. He said, but what we do, he said, what we're going to do, what Jews do is we're going to have a memorial, or we're going to have a celebration, or we're going to do something in a year. And we want to know, do you want to be part of it? We don't want to do anything without you, but we're going to do something. So do you want to join us? I didn't hesitate. I said, yes. And so that was the first meeting of what 7 Days became, July of 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about it, because for the people, obviously, a lot of people know in Kansas City and other parts of the country, but talk a little bit about it for those that don't.
Yeah. So 7 Days was created because of the murders of my dad and Reed and Terry Lamano. And our mission is to overcome hate by promoting kindness through education and dialogue. And we've morphed over the last 10 years. And right now, I mean, not significantly, but we had a big focus on interfaith, and we did a lot of education, outwardly education, for people to understand how we have similarities in faiths and non-faiths. And then it became really clear that who I wanted to, and our board wanted to focus on and offer resources to, are high school students. And so we have a kindness youth leadership team. That kindness youth leadership team started out as a youth advisory board in 2015. We had a youth advisory board. We had about 8 to 10 kids. The next year we'd have, 8 to 10 kids, et cetera. And then that youth advisory board transitioned to our kindness youth leadership team. And now we have about 25 high school students on this team, and we mentor them from September to May. So they apply, it's application process. They apply, they do community service projects that they create and want to do. And we offer them opportunities to learn about different faiths. We offer them opportunities to learn about adulting. We offer them the opportunity to help plan our events. So we just had a diversity dinner, and we had a full house. So we held it at the Miriam Community Center, and the KYLTers, they planned it. They planned the decorations, they planned the food, they planned the friendship activities that were at the table to get people engaged. And these students who have been involved with us now for over 10 years are well past college. Some of them are well past college. And one of those young men is actually on our board of directors. So Jake Goldman was at Blue Valley North when the murders happened, and he helped me start the youth advisory board. And now full circle, he's helping run and start a startup in California. I think this is his second startup. And he's on our board of directors, 7 Days board of directors. So we have kindness resources that go into schools. We create material for kindness clubs and kindness walks. So not only do we outwardly offer resources, but we are also a platform for people to come to us. And we have students that we celebrate who are artists, and they help us create our themed art during the year. We have 7 themes: love, discover, others, connect, you, go, and onward. And all of these themes mean something and have a lot of meaning to them. And then we also offer scholarships to students who are doing kindness initiatives on their own. So it's an ebb and flow. It's in and out, kindness, and it's about making a choice to be kind, and we have to be taught that, just like we have to be taught how to do math. And it's about mentoring. It's about seeing it in your home or seeing it in a community. And we're helping these students, everyone that we touch, so they can see it. They can be it. If they don't see it, they can be it, and then they can show it to friends and family as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's incredible. So, Mindy, what's going on now with you professionally?
Professionally, I still have my hands on 7 Days, and I'm a board member, and I'm intimately involved in planning our 2025 kindness breakfast. It's a Cultivate Kindness breakfast, and as a board member, I help recruit other board members, et cetera. So I love working with our team on 7 Days. As I mentioned, I'm also continuing with Workplace Healing. It is a little bit more of a side hustle, but I think we're going to find a home for it. And this past year, in early 2024, in May, I thought, what would it be like to work in a space that is not about my story? Because for the last 10 years, everything that I've done with such heated passion has been about my story. And so not only am I creating something, but I'm living that story all the time and telling my story often. And so a friend, Aviva Ajmera, and I were having breakfast, and she said, well, why don't you look at a global foundation? You've got all this years of foundation experience. And it's funny, I didn't even think of it like that. I thought, well, I'm just creating it as I go. And so I started looking at global foundations, and right, 7 Days had just recognized 10 amazing people who are Ripple of Kindness winners. Lisa Genter has been one in the past from Community America Credit Union, Trent Green, Dayton Moore. And then this past year, we recognized 10 amazing people. Alvin Brooks is one of them, and Dr. Gary Morsch, who is really well known for starting Heart to Heart International. And he started Docs Who Care. And recently, in the last 3 years, he started Global Care Force. So he and I were talking, and I said, I'm interested in seeing what it's like to work for an organization that's a nonprofit, but it's not my story. I want to see what that's like. And so I wasn't expecting to get a job with him, and they offered me a position. So I am the Vice President of Strategy and Engagement, and I'm enjoying kind of doing some deep dives in some of the areas. I did a deep dive in development for a little bit. Now I'm doing a deep dive with them in their global programs, and then we're getting ready to focus on development. So I've been looking at strategy, and we're getting ready to focus on development. So it's definitely interesting and different, and it's probably healthy. I feel like it was a healthy move for me to not 100% of the time always be focused on my story, on that story from April 13th. So I feel like it's been very healthy. And I have to say, Jeff, it's led me to think I don't have a master's degree. And for whatever reason, I still feel less than because of that. I just do. I have a master's degree in life. I have a PhD in life. I have all of that in life, but I don't have a master's degree. And I was looking at a whole variety of master's degrees, and I'm very interested in workforce development, and I'm very interested in organizational leadership. I feel like I do that, but I don't know all the fancy words that all the young people are using now. So I'm looking at I'm enjoying my position at Global Care Force, but I feel like I want to also add on perhaps getting a master's degree in like organizational leadership with an emphasis on workforce development. It's very fascinating to me. So that's something that's interesting.
Yeah, no, I love that. Mindy, I love to help two groups of people. One's that recent college graduate. So think about your days after you graduated from OU. To help them, guide them on their first, post-college career job and job search and starting their career. What advice would you have for that group of people?
So Jeff, that's super easy because my son is that person. So Lucas graduated from the University of Arkansas in May of 2024. And I would say to him, and I would say to other college grads, is the first job is so likely not going to be your last. So get a job and wake up every day and say, I'm going to learn something today, and say, I might fail today, and that's okay too. And I worry that young people don't understand what stress is like, and to feel it and to say, oh, I'm stressed, and then work through it and then move past it. So I feel like I hear that from a lot of other parents, is that the students that are getting out of school are like, oh, I have this feeling. What is that feeling? What should I do? And I'm like, oh, it's stress. Let's take some deep breathing. Let's go for a walk, and it's okay. Just try your hardest. That's all you can do is deliver what you can that's best that day. And some days are better than others. So we're having those conversations right now. And and you know what? It's interesting, and I'll say about Lucas, and I'm fine saying this, is that he's so much like me that he doesn't feel successful, but he is successful. The company that he's with already put him in some extra training, and I said, sweetie, they did that for you because you already are being successful. But he's like me. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm behind the 8 ball. I need to do this. I need to learn that. So he definitely gets that from me.
Yeah, I love that. That's the second group I love helping, is the person that wants to take a a leadership path where they're actually responsible for a team of people on an org chart, and they get that first promotion to do that, what advice, Mindy, would you have for them as they begin that leadership journey?
Right. Attend some leadership conferences. Ask some mentors who you see in your life as a leader, what mistakes they made. I would go find out what mistakes did other people make that you, leaders that you value. I've done that. I've said, what mistakes did you make? I'm walking into this space. What mistakes did you make? So I can know what they are. And that doesn't mean that I might not make them, but it means that I'm aware of them. And yeah, get advice from people around you in your space. Your boss's boss's boss. Ask them, to go to lunch or have a coffee, etc. And ask them, what mistakes did you make? I think that's so important, because what we think, I think, as humans who want to succeed and think about how can I be better, what can I learn more, how can I be better, we are worried about making mistakes. And I've gotten past that in my maturity, also in my age and my maturity. But that doesn't mean I want to make a mistake. I don't want to make a mistake. But if I do, I know it's not going to be the end of the world. And but I'd like to have an idea of what mistakes I might make ahead of time. So I like to ask people, what mistakes did you make? And what books are you reading? I love to read, leadership books. I think that's always a good option as well, or listening to podcasts, leadership podcasts.
Like the Corporate Couch. Anyhow,
I think the best podcast is the Corporate Couch. I think everyone should listen to the Corporate Couch and hear all the leadership that comes from that Corporate Couch. Absolutely.
No, I love that advice. I'm just kidding about the Corporate Couch, just a little bit, but yeah, and you said it earlier, and make sure you build relationships not only within your company but outside your company. I would add that advice. But Mindy, you have such an inspiring story, and to go through a tragedy like you did and make it into something where it's helping others, it's just a phenomenal story. So thank you so much for being on the Corporate Couch today.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. And I appreciate what you're doing, helping people with their corporate process or their non-corporate, right? It's always a zigzag. So I appreciate what you're doing as well.
Is.
Thank you.
We've talked to a lot of people that had, tragedies in their life on the Corporate Couch. Danny Bader, was dead for 7 minutes after being electrocuted with like 10,000 volts when he was on a painting job when he was about 27 years old, and wrote several books about it. We had people that, could have died in 9/11. Caroline Hammond was also had a death experience on a plane. Mindy, what a tragic event, April 13th, 2014, where she lost her oldest son and her father, killed by a white supremacist in local Kansas City, a Jewish community center. I don't even know. It's hard to go there, but Joe, what did that event? How did it impact you when you listened to it?
It was something that is kind of there. You can't ignore it. You can't not talk about it, right? And it is also an experience that obviously probably nobody else in our listening audience, or very few people in our listening audience, could compare to. Not that this is a competition, but I mean, you don't have any basis to go on if you're dealing with somebody like that or talking about somebody like that. What can you compare it to? There is nothing that you can, which makes it an interesting study. One of the things that you need to study from this is what good can come out of this. And as long as her recovery it was very interesting that was one of the first things that she wanted to address, is what good can possibly come out of seeing your father and your son being murdered like this. So she has started a couple of different organizations, the 7-Day organization and the Workplace Healing organizations, that are direct results coming out of this tragedy, which I think is very healthy. There have been some tragic events in my life that I don't think I've yet found the good that could have come out of them. But she immediately sought that and started these organizations, and they will be a legacy to her father and her son's memory for years to come, that these ideas were born out of tragedy.
Yeah, and it reminds me of Adam Grant. He talks about, the grief doesn't go away, the grief doesn't shrink, the grief stays, and we grow. And that's what I just came across this quote here in January. We're recording January 17, 2025. I just came across this quote, and I think that's what, it doesn't go away, but we grow, and she's grown. And, to get into the kind of the more fun, well, not to make light, but I mean, the other thing she's done, I mean, like, she was the first NFL cheerleader to be on the podcast.
Right.
And she was an Oklahoma cheerleader, and she was an entrepreneur right out of college. And, her first job was she started her own business to supply cheerleading camp materials, and then she decided to move to Kansas City and because she wanted to be an NFL cheerleader with the Chiefs, and she's also working for the International Cheerleading Federation, but it was only a summer job, and she was doing work. She was a waitress at Johnny's Tavern, and just like many guests on the corporate couch, she needed to get another job, and she's waiting on these two guys at lunch, and they were joking around and saying, "Hey, are you going to buy us free drinks today?" And he said, "You look like you can buy us
you can
free
afford
drinks."
it. Buy your own drinks.
And so they work for a wealth management company, and she had this other job offer to be the event manager for a local Kansas City mall, and she went with her gut, got into wealth management as an admin, basically office manager, and went to Payne Weber and H&R Block's financial services, and then got mentored by Richard Boyer at whatever company they were at together. And they started a wealth management company that, they had for, and it still may be in existence, but I think she was in it, from 2007 to 2021. So, I mean, she's done some great things. Her whole vision board thing with Richard Branson was, fantastic. And
I'm going to meet Richard Branson, and then guess what? You're meeting Richard Branson. Oh, okay.
Right. Yes. It's just so good. And in terms of that, and any other thoughts you had on the conversation with Mindy?
The whole idea of waiting for a response to a job interview and then getting two responses back from completely different, not just different jobs, but completely different industries. I don't think I've ever had that experience. There's been a time or two that I've had to come to a fork in my life and decide about, decision A or decision B. But I've never had a chance where all those decisions are so incredibly different from each other. Just makes for an interesting life. She's lived a lot, a very varied life, a very interesting life, made for a very, very interesting interview.
Joe, since you said the fork in the road, I'll remind our listeners of the great philosopher Yogi Berra, who said, if you come to a fork in the road, take it.
I couldn't have said it any better.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.